Standing frozen in the conference room, I watched as Jake unveiled MY Project, the one I'd worked on for 6 months, to thunderous applause. The CEO patted his shoulder while my colleagues nodded approvingly. Nobody noticed my trembling hands or the tears threatening to spill. This wasn't just intellectual theft. This was career assassination. What Jake didn't know: I documented everything since the day he first asked to review my files. When someone steals your life's work, you don't just get mad, you get methodical. 4 years at Tech Fusion had taught me many things: the competitive nature of Boston's tech industry, the long hours required to stand out, the politics that often mattered more than actual talent. But nothing prepared me for having my work stolen right from under me. My name is Chantel Davis, and until 6 months ago, I was just another senior product developer at Tech Fusion. Not unhappy, but definitely unfulfilled. 3 times I'd been passed over for promotion despite consistently exceeding performance targets. Meanwhile, I watched less qualified colleagues climb the ladder, most of them men who played golf with the right executives or laughed at the right jokes during happy hours. Rather than becoming bitter, I channeled my frustration into a passion project. For months, I'd been developing an algorithm that could revolutionize our data processing systems. The concept was elegant. By restructuring our approach to cloud computing resources, we could reduce processing time by 60% while cutting costs by 40%. In an industry where milliseconds and dollars matter equally, my solution could save the company millions. I worked nights, weekends. I dreamt in code. My apartment became a secondary office, walls covered in flowcharts and diagrams. My best friend Alicia, who worked in the marketing department, joked that I needed an intervention. "You know what normal people do on Saturday nights?" she asked one evening when she forced me to take a dinner break. "They don't rewrite cloud computing architectures." "This could be it, though," I explained, too excited to be embarrassed by my obsession. "The thing that finally gets them to see me." Jake Sullivan arrived at Tech Fusion 2 years after me, but had already secured a management position. Tall, with perfect teeth and carefully styled dark hair, Jake was the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday and brought donuts to morning meetings. He was likable, charismatic, everyone's friend. He was also, as I would discover, dangerously mediocre at his actual job. But mediocrity well disguised by charm can take you surprisingly far. We weren't friends exactly, but we maintained cordial relationships. Occasional lunch in the cafeteria, small talk at company events, the usual professional courtesy. When my department head, Thomas, told me I'd be collaborating with Jake on refining my project before presentation, I was disappointed but not alarmed. "Jake has a great relationship with the executive team," Thomas explained, not meeting my eyes. "His input could help position your project for approval." Jake approached me later that day, all smiles and enthusiasm. "Chantel, Thomas told me about your algorithm project. Sounds fascinating. Mind if I review your files? I'd love to help polish it before you present." Something in his tone made me hesitate. But office politics demanded cooperation. "Sure, Jake. I'll share access to the development folder." That evening, Alicia and I met for dinner, and I mentioned the collaboration. She nearly choked on her wine. "Jake Sullivan? You're trusting Jake with your project?" Thomas assigned him. "What's the problem?" Alicia lowered her voice. "You haven't heard? Jessica from UX Design left because of him. Apparently, he took her interface redesign, made minimal changes, and presented it as his own initiative. Got a bonus while she got needs improvement on her review." I dismissed her concern. "That's just office gossip." And Melissa from accounting? Same story. Then, Rachel from marketing. A pattern was emerging, but I still couldn't believe anyone would be so blatant. That's different. My project has months of documentation with my name all over it. Alicia gave me a look that I'd later recognize as prophetic. "Just watch your back." 3 days later, I received a cryptic email from Thomas. "Meeting with executives rescheduled." Details forthcoming. When I asked for clarification, I received no response. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. I checked my shared development folder. Jake had accessed the files 16 times in the past 48 hours. That night I couldn't sleep. Something didn't feel right. Call it intuition or just healthy paranoia in a competitive workplace. But I forwarded copies of all my original work to my personal email, complete with timestamps and development notes. Just in case. I had no idea how quickly. Just in case would become thank God I did. The office buzzed with unusual energy when I arrived early Thursday morning. Administrative assistants hurried through hallways carrying extra chairs. The good coffee had been brought out instead of the usual break room sludge. Something was happening. Big presentation in the main conference room, said Drew from accounting when I asked about the commotion. Some breakthrough project that's got the executives excited. Didn't you get the invite? I hadn't. A cold feeling spread through my chest as I checked my calendar. Nothing. Who's presenting? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Jake Sullivan. Word is he's been working on something revolutionary. The main conference room doors were open when I arrived, despite the meeting not starting for another 20 minutes. I slipped in quietly and took a seat in the back row, nodding to a few colleagues who seemed surprised to see me there. The room filled quickly. Every executive attended, including our CEO, William Porter, a notoriously difficult man to impress. Jake stood at the front, looking confident in a new suit. My project files were open on his laptop, connected to the room's display screen. My heart pounded as William called the meeting to order. I've heard promising things about this presentation, he said, nodding at Jake. Show us what you've got. Jake launched into his presentation with practiced ease. For the past 6 months, I've been developing a revolutionary approach to our cloud computing architecture. 6 months. Exactly how long I'd been working on my project. Slide after slide, word for word, Jake presented my work, my diagrams, my processing models, my cost-saving projections, all with my name methodically erased. He spoke with the confidence of someone who understood every nuance of the project, though I caught small mistakes that revealed his surface-level comprehension. The executives leaned forward in their seats, visibly impressed. Questions came, and Jake handled them with rehearsed responses, answers I'd prepared for my own presentation. The potential savings here are remarkable, said our CFO, actually smiling. Implementation timeline? Asked William. 3 months, Jake replied smoothly. I've already developed the framework and preliminary testing shows promising results. I felt physically ill. The room seemed to spin around me as colleagues nodded approvingly. Several took notes. Someone whispered about management potential. I raised my hand, desperate to speak, but Thomas caught my eye from across the room and subtly shook his head. The message was clear. Don't make a scene. The presentation concluded with William actually standing to shake Jake's hand. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Let's fast-track this. As people filed out, buzzing with excitement, I heard our COO mention to William, Jake would make an excellent candidate for the director position opening next month. I remained seated, unable to move, as the room emptied. Eventually, only Jake and I remained. What the hell was that? I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake's friendly facade didn't falter as he gathered his materials. A successful presentation. You should be happy the project's moving forward. That was my work. Every slide, every concept. He shrugged, smile now, taking on a smugger quality. Can you prove that? Because all the documentation I have shows otherwise. He lowered his voice. Look, Chantel, this is how the game is played. You're talented, but you don't know how to sell yourself. Consider this a learning experience. I'll tell everyone the truth, I threatened. With what evidence? It's your word against mine, and I've got a pretty compelling paper trail. He closed his laptop. Besides, who do you think they'll believe? The person who just excited the entire executive team, or the disgruntled employee jealous of her colleague's success? As he walked out, he turned back with one final comment. I'd focus on being a team player if I were you. Your performance review is coming up. I sat alone in the empty conference room for nearly 30 minutes, cycling through shock, rage, and disbelief. When I finally gathered myself enough to return to my desk, an email notification caught my attention. Patent application filed. Cloud Resource Optimization Algorithm. Inventor, Jake Sullivan. He hadn't just stolen my presentation. He'd filed for a patent, potentially blocking me from any legal claim to my own work. The betrayal was so thorough, so calculated, I could hardly process it. That night, I cried until no more tears would come. Then, remembering my own words from that first meeting, I opened my laptop. When someone steals your life's work, you don't just get mad, you get methodical. The Human Resources office at Tech Fusion occupied a corner of the third floor, decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and integrity. Words that rang hollow as I sat across from Paula, the HR director, the following Tuesday. "I understand you're upset, Chantel," she said, her expression professionally sympathetic. "But these are serious allegations." "They're not allegations," I corrected, sliding a folder across her desk. "I've brought evidence." Inside were emails between Jake and me, showing his request to review my files. Server logs indicating my months of work on the project before Jake ever accessed it. Development notes with my name and timestamps. Paula glanced at the papers without really reading them. "I'll certainly look into this," she said in a tone that suggested otherwise. "But I should warn you, making accusations against colleagues can create a difficult working environment." "More difficult than having 6 months of work stolen?" Her smile tightened. "We take all concerns seriously. I'll speak with the relevant parties and follow up." I knew then that nothing would come of this meeting. Paula was friends with Jake. I'd seen them having lunch together regularly. The system that should protect employees from this exact situation was compromised by the same office politics that had enabled the theft in the first place. Back at my desk, I found an email from Thomas requesting my presence in his office. His expression was grim when I arrived. "Close the door," he said, not looking up from his computer. I complied, stomach nodding with anticipation. "HR tells me you've made some accusations." "They're not accusations if they're true," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Jake stole my work. All of it. You know I've been developing that algorithm for months." Thomas sighed, finally meeting my gaze. "Office politics isn't a game you're particularly good at, Chantel." The statement stung because it was true. I'd always believed good work spoke for itself. "Jake has been assigned to lead the project team," he continued, "which means, effectively, he's now your supervisor on this initiative." "That's my project," I protested. "You know that. You've seen me working on it since last fall." "What I know," Thomas said carefully, "is that Jake presented a compelling solution that excited the executive team. Everything else is subjective." "It's not subjective. I have documentation." "Let me give you some advice," he interrupted. "Tech Fusion values team players, people who contribute without needing constant recognition. This situation could be an opportunity if you approach it correctly." "An opportunity to have my work stolen again?" His expression hardened. "An opportunity to demonstrate your ability to collaborate effectively, something that's been noted as a development area in your past reviews." The implication was clear. Drop this fight or face consequences. The system was closing ranks around Jake. I'd become the problem for speaking up, not him for stealing my work. That afternoon, I reached out to Sarah Jenkins, a former colleague who'd left Tech Fusion the previous year. We met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. "I'm not surprised," she said after I explained the situation. "Same thing happened to me. Project on customer retention modeling. Jake offered to help, then suddenly he's presenting it to leadership as his brainchild. Why didn't you fight it?" Sarah stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "I tried. Got labeled difficult and not a team player. Next performance review was brutal. No promotion, no raise. I took the hint and left." "Was it just you?" "No, Melissa from finance. Rachel from marketing. Always women, always solo workers rather than people with team backing. He's smart about who he targets. A pattern was emerging, more deliberate than I'd initially thought. Jake wasn't an opportunist. He was a calculated predator in the workplace. Back at the office, I found Alicia waiting by my desk. "I've been looking into something," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "The server logs every access to shared development folders. As a marketing admin, I can pull those reports." She handed me a flash drive. "Everything's here. Access times, user IDs, file modifications. 6 months of data showing you created the project, and Jake only accessed it last week." "You're amazing," I said, pocketing the drive. "This could be exactly what I need." "Be careful," she warned. "Jake has friends in IT. Don't use your work computer to analyze this." That evening, I meticulously reviewed the data. The logs told a clear story. Months of consistent work from my user ID, then a flurry of activity from Jake's account in the days before his presentation. I also recovered deleted emails from my archive where Jake had asked specific questions, revealing his limited understanding of the project's technical components. The next day brought another unpleasant surprise. Jake had scheduled a project kickoff meeting and assigned me to take notes, effectively relegating me to an administrative role on my own project. During the meeting, he stumbled through technical explanations, covered by broad statements about proprietary algorithms. When difficult questions arose, he deflected to me for implementation details, then quickly reclaimed control when I began to speak. 3 days later, I discovered through office gossip that the company had already started the paperwork to fast-track Jake's promotion based on his breakthrough project. The final decision would happen after a board meeting scheduled in 2 weeks, where Jake would present the implementation plan and preliminary results. I was reaching a breaking point when a message arrived from an unexpected source. Diana Winters, one of the company's executive vice presidents, requested a private meeting off-site. Confused, but hopeful, I agreed. We met at a small restaurant 10 blocks from the office. Diana was an intimidating figure, sharp, direct, with 20 years of industry experience and a reputation for zero tolerance for incompetence. "I'll be blunt," she said after we ordered. "Something about Sullivan's presentation didn't sit right with me. The concepts were solid, but his understanding seemed superficial. When pressed on technical details, he deferred or generalized. My heart raced. You noticed. I've been in this industry too long not to recognize when someone doesn't fully understand what they're presenting." She leaned forward. "I've been making discreet inquiries. Your name keeps coming up in connection with cloud architecture innovations." "It's my project," I admitted. "Every slide, every concept, I've been working on it for 6 months." Diana's expression remained neutral. "That's a serious allegation. Do you have proof?" "Some. Server logs, email timestamps, development notes." "Not enough," she said bluntly. "Not for the kind of accusation you're making. You need irrefutable evidence that even Jake's supporters can't ignore." "Why are you telling me this?" Diana took a sip of her water before answering. "Because I've seen this before. Talented people pushed aside by those more skilled at office politics than actual innovation. It damages the company and the industry." She paused. "And because if what you're saying is true, Tech Fusion is about to invest millions in a project led by someone who doesn't understand it." As I walked back to the office, a strange mixture of hope and determination replaced my despair. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone with actual power had doubts about Jake. It wasn't proof, but it was a start. And for the first time since that devastating presentation, I had something resembling a plan. "The implementation schedule is impossible," I said to Alicia over lunch, 3 days after my meeting with Diana. "Jake's promised results in 3 months that would take 6. Minimum. He doesn't understand the technical constraints." "So what happens when he fails?" Alicia asked. That's the problem. He won't fail because I'll be doing the actual work while he takes credit. And if I refuse, performance improvement plan, Alicia finished for me. The warning signs were already appearing. Jake had begun subtly undermining my reputation, making comments in meetings about my resistance to collaboration and communication challenges. Several colleagues who had previously been friendly now avoided lunch with me, fearful of association with someone who had apparently become politically toxic. The situation escalated when Jake scheduled an implementation planning meeting and deliberately excluded me, despite my being the only person who fully understood the algorithm's complexity. When I raised the issue with Thomas, he suggested I focus on being more cooperative. That afternoon, as I returned from a much-needed coffee break, I found Jake at my desk. "Just the person I wanted to see," he said with his practiced smile. "We're hitting some roadblocks with the implementation. The testing environment is showing processing delays that weren't in the original projections." Of course there were delays. He'd misunderstood a key component of the architecture. "I'll need you to fix it," he continued. "But let's keep this between us. No need to document the issues in the project tracker. We don't want to create unnecessary concern." Translation: fix my mistakes but leave no paper trail that would expose my incompetence. "I'll look into it," I replied neutrally. The problems were exactly as I'd suspected. Jake had misinterpreted the resource allocation module, creating inefficiencies that contradicted the algorithm's core purpose. Fixing it would take days of intense work. A plan began forming in my mind. I could address the issues while simultaneously documenting every flaw in Jake's implementation. Each correction would prove my intimate knowledge of the system knowledge that the supposed creator lacked. I worked late into the evening, carefully saving each correction with detailed notes explaining the original error and the fix applied. I stored everything on an external drive, not trusting the company's servers with these records. The next morning, I received a message from Diana requesting an update. We established a secure communication channel using personal emails, and I shared my discoveries about the implementation flaws. "This is good," she replied, "but we need more. Concrete evidence that connects you to the original development and proves Sullivan lacks fundamental understanding." She was right. I needed something irrefutable. That evening, I returned home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Cold fear washed over me as I cautiously entered. The place had been searched, drawers left open, papers scattered. My heart sank when I realized my work laptop was missing, though thankfully, my external drive with the evidence was still in my bag. The police officer who responded to my call looked sympathetic, but not hopeful. "Any valuable jewelry or cash taken?" he asked, filling out his report. "No, just my work computer." "Strange. Most burglars go for items they can easily sell." He looked around the apartment. "Any sensitive information on that laptop?" More than he could possibly understand. The next day at work, I reported the theft to IT security. They issued a replacement laptop with my standard access privileges reinstated. Jake watched from across the open office, his expression unreadable. Later that afternoon, Thomas called me into his office. The HR director, Paula, was already seated inside. "Chantel," Thomas began awkwardly, "we need to discuss some concerns about your recent performance." Paula slid a document across the desk. "This is a formal performance improvement plan. It outlines areas where we need to see immediate change." I scanned the document, rage building with each bullet point. Resistance to collaboration, difficulty accepting feedback, undermining team cohesion. Each accusation was vague yet damning. "This is retaliation," I said flatly, "for reporting Jake's theft of my work." Paula's expression hardened. "These concerns were documented before any such allegations. You'll need to sign this today and commit to the improvement actions outlined." I took the document without signing. "I'll review it and respond appropriately." That evening, Alicia came to my apartment, looking troubled. "They're pressuring me to distance myself from you," she admitted. "My manager said my choice of associations could impact my upcoming review." "You should do what's best for you," I told her. though the thought of losing my only ally at work was devastating. That's not why I'm here. She handed me a flash drive. I found something while running a marketing analysis report. Jake has been exaggerating the projected savings in his executive updates. He's reporting 60% cost reduction, when the actual implementation as designed would deliver maybe 30%. He's falsifying reports to management? Looks that way. And there's more. The industry conference next month? Tech Fusion has booked the keynote slot to announce Jake's breakthrough innovation. Press releases are already being drafted. The situation was accelerating. Once the company publicly attributed the innovation to Jake, walking it back would be nearly impossible without significant embarrassment to the executive team. I'm running out of time, I realized aloud. There's one more thing, Alicia said hesitantly. Horizon Technologies reached out to me asking for a reference. They're looking for a senior developer with cloud architecture experience. I may have mentioned your name. Horizon was a direct competitor, smaller but growing rapidly. The opportunity was tempting. Escape this toxic situation, start fresh somewhere that might value my contributions. But leaving meant Jake would win. My work would become his legacy, and the pattern would continue with future victims. Thank you, I said, but I'm not running away. Not yet. The next morning, I received an unexpected email from the executive assistant to the board of directors. The pre-conference board meeting had been scheduled for the following Thursday. Jake would present the full implementation plan and preliminary results to the board members, key investors, and senior leadership. This was my deadline. Whatever evidence I needed had to be compiled before that meeting. I spent the weekend developing a comprehensive strategy. First, I embedded unique digital signatures in the code markers that proved my authorship and timestamps that predated Jake's involvement. Then I created a presentation documenting the entire timeline with server logs, email exchanges, and implementation corrections. On Monday, I discovered Jake had been manipulating testing data to hide the performance issues resulting from his misunderstanding of the algorithm. He was presenting fabricated results to management while pressuring the development team to fix problems off the record. When confronted privately about the ethical implications, he was dismissive. Every successful project requires a little marketing spin, he said with a shrug. The actual implementation will work eventually, and no one will remember these little hiccups. But these weren't little hiccups. The algorithm, as Jake understood it, would never deliver the promised results. The company was about to announce breakthrough technology that didn't function as advertised. The potential damage to Tech Fusion's reputation and financial standing was significant. I shared this development with Diana, who responded with visible alarm. This goes beyond academic dishonesty, she said during a hurried coffee meeting. This is approaching securities fraud if investors are being misled about technological capabilities. 2 days before the board meeting, Jake called a full project team meeting. Looking confident as ever, he distributed printed materials outlining the presentation strategy. Thursday is our moment, he announced proudly. The board, key investors, and press will all be present. This is more than a project update. It's a company-defining announcement. He assigned speaking roles, giving himself the bulk of the presentation time while relegating team members to brief technical segments. I received no role at all. Chantel will attend as an observer, he explained when questioned. She's still coming up to speed on the project requirements. The audacity was breathtaking. I remained silent, already focused on Thursday's real agenda. That night, I received a text from Diana. Everything in place. Be prepared. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The methodical fury that had sustained me was transforming into something else, a calm certainty that justice was within reach. The path forward was clear now. Jake had created the perfect stage for his own undoing. All I needed to do was be ready when the curtain rose. Thursday morning arrived with an atmosphere of anticipation at Tech Fusion. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the main conference center, a space typically reserved for company-wide announcements and major client presentations. Jake arrived wearing a new suit, moving through the office with the confident air of someone expecting coronation. I dressed carefully that morning, in a professional navy blue dress, hair neatly styled, expression composed. The external drive with my evidence was securely in my bag, along with printed copies of key documents. Diana had confirmed my speaking slot would be honored if requested a small but crucial guarantee. The conference room filled quickly with board members, senior executives, and key investors. I recognized representatives from 3 venture capital firms and a technology reporter from a national business publication. Jake had indeed arranged a significant audience for his moment of glory. William Porter called the meeting to order precisely at 10. Today's primary agenda item is the presentation of TechFusion's breakthrough cloud optimization algorithm, which promises to redefine industry standards for resource allocation and cost efficiency. Jake took the floor, smiling confidently at the assembled decision-makers. Thank you for the opportunity to present what I believe will be a transformative technology for TechFusion and our clients. His presentation was polished, clearly rehearsed extensively. He walked through the business case, the technical overview, and the projected financial impact. Charts displayed impressive performance metrics and cost savings numbers I knew to be exaggerated based on Alicia's discovery. I sat quietly, recording the entire presentation on my phone while taking detailed notes. Several times, Jake made technical assertions that demonstrated his fundamental misunderstanding of the algorithm's architecture. I documented each error meticulously. When he opened the floor for questions, a board member asked about the specifics of the resource allocation method. Jake faltered momentarily before launching into a prepared response that skirted the technical details. The proprietary nature of the algorithm prevents me from elaborating too specifically, he explained smoothly. But I can assure you the approach is revolutionary. Another investor questioned the timeline for full implementation. We've already completed successful testing in our development environment, Jake claimed, another exaggeration. Full production implementation can be achieved within 3 months. William looked pleased, nodding at several board members. The room had the distinct energy of people ready to celebrate a victory. Before we conclude, William said, are there any other questions or comments regarding this initiative? This was my moment. I raised my hand. William seemed surprised, perhaps not having noticed my presence until now. Yes? You have a question? Not a question, I replied, standing from my seat. A statement of fact. May I approach? Confusion flickered across William's face, but he nodded. I walked to the front of the room, connecting my external drive to the presentation system. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. My name is Chantel Davis, Senior Product Developer at TechFusion, I began, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. For the past 6 months, I have been developing the cloud optimization algorithm that Mr. Sullivan has presented today. Murmurs rippled through the room. Jake stepped forward. This is inappropriate. Please allow Miss Davis to continue. Diana interrupted from her seat at the executive table. I believe this is relevant information for the board to consider. William looked between Diana and Jake, then nodded for me to proceed. The algorithm presented today was conceived, developed, and tested by me over a 6-month period ending 3 weeks ago, I continued. Mr. Sullivan was granted review access to my work shortly before presenting it as his own to the executive team. Jake's face flushed. This is absurd. Chantel is a team member who's contributed some implementation work, but I have evidence, I said firmly, opening my presentation. First, server access logs showing my consistent development of this project, dating back 6 months, with Mr. Sullivan's access beginning only 2 weeks before his presentation. The logs displayed clearly on screen, with user IDs and timestamps highlighted. Second, email exchanges where Mr. Sullivan asks basic questions about the algorithm's function questions that would be unnecessary if he had developed it himself. I displayed several email chains, showing Jake's limited understanding of the very technology he claimed to have created. Third, the implementation corrections I've made over the past 2 weeks, fixing fundamental errors resulting from Mr. Sullivan's misunderstanding of the algorithm's architecture. technical diagrams appeared on screen, showing the original flawed implementation and my corrections. Fourth, embedded signatures in the codebase that prove my authorship and development timeline. I demonstrated the signatures' digital fingerprints that irrefutably tied me to the original development. And finally, evidence that Mr. Sullivan has been manipulating test results to hide implementation problems while exaggerating projected performance gains in reports to management. I displayed side-by-side comparisons of actual test results and Jake's modified reports to executives. The room had fallen completely silent. All eyes moved between my evidence on screen, Jake's increasingly pale face, and William's deepening frown. Jake finally broke the silence. "This is a desperate attempt to claim credit for collaborative work," he insisted, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Chantel has had performance issues and was recently placed on a development plan. This is clearly retaliation." "Actually," Diana interjected, standing to join me at the front of the room, "I've been conducting a parallel investigation into this matter for the past 2 weeks." She connected her own drive to the system, displaying additional evidence. "My findings corroborate everything Miss Davis has presented. Furthermore, I've spoken with 3 former Tech Fusion employees who describe similar experiences with Mr. Sullivan taking credit for their work." William's expression had transformed from confusion to anger. "Jake, is there any explanation for this evidence?" Jake's composure cracked. "This is a setup. They've fabricated this entire—" "One moment," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "There's one final piece of evidence." I played an audio recording from 2 days earlier, Jake's voice clearly recognizable. "Look, the board doesn't understand the technical details. They just want results. So what if I take a little credit? That's how this business works. You do the technical stuff, I handle the politics, everybody wins." The recording continued with Jake admitting to modifying test results and acknowledging that Chantel's original design was the only workable solution. Complete silence filled the room as the recording ended. Jake stood frozen, his carefully constructed facade finally shattered. William broke the silence. "Jake, please wait outside while the board discusses this matter." As Jake left the room, shoulders slumped in defeat, Diana addressed the board. "I believe we have an obligation to correct this situation immediately, both ethically and legally. The patent application filed under Mr. Sullivan's name represents a significant liability if it proceeds under fraudulent pretenses." The board chair nodded gravely. "Miss Davis, thank you for bringing this to our attention. While deeply troubling, your evidence appears compelling. The board will need to address this matter urgently." I was asked to wait outside while they deliberated. In the hallway, Jake sat alone on a bench, not meeting my eyes as I passed. The man who had seemed so formidable weeks ago now appeared small, his career unraveling with each passing minute. After 20 minutes, Diana emerged to escort me back inside. William stood at the head of the table, expressions solemn but resolved. "Miss Davis, the board has made several immediate decisions. First, Mr. Sullivan has been placed on administrative leave pending termination proceedings. Second, all patent applications related to this technology will be corrected to name you as the inventor. Third, you will lead the implementation team moving forward." Relief washed over me so powerfully I briefly feared my legs might give way. After weeks of fighting an uphill battle against a system designed to protect people like Jake, justice had finally prevailed. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "I look forward to delivering the results this technology can actually achieve." William nodded. "We also owe you an apology. Tech Fusion failed to provide appropriate attribution and protection for your intellectual contributions. That will be corrected immediately." As the meeting adjourned, several board members approached to introduce themselves, suddenly interested in hearing more about my algorithm directly from the source. The technology reporter asked for an exclusive interview about the real story behind Tech Fusion's innovation. Diana remained by my side throughout, occasionally steering conversations away when I appeared overwhelmed. "You did it," she said quietly during a brief moment alone. "And you did it the right way with evidence and professionalism." "Thank you for believing me," I replied. "Without your support, I recognize talent, Chantel. Tech Fusion needs innovators like you, not credit stealers like Sullivan. As I gathered my materials to leave, Thomas approached, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Chantel, I want to apologize for how this situation was handled. You should have listened. I finished for him. You should have investigated when I first raised concerns. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. The performance improvement plan has been removed from your file, and there will be a formal apology added to your record. Too little, too late, but a victory nonetheless. As I walked back to my desk, colleagues who had distanced themselves weeks earlier suddenly found reasons to congratulate me. Their sudden support felt hollow after their previous silence, but I acknowledged them politely. This wasn't the time for grudges. Alicia was waiting at my desk, barely containing her excitement. Is it true? Jake's been suspended? Pending termination, I confirmed. And I've been named project lead. She hugged me tightly. Justice actually prevailed for once. We should celebrate tonight. Looking around at the office that had been the site of so much stress and betrayal, I nodded. Definitely. But first, I have a project team to reorganize. The weight that had pressed down on me for weeks finally lifted. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Implementing the algorithm properly would require intense work, and rebuilding trust with colleagues would take time. But for the first time since that devastating presentation when Jake first stole my work, I could breathe freely again. My idea was back where it belonged, and Jake's carefully constructed career was collapsing around him, built as it was on stolen achievements rather than actual merit. Sometimes justice requires patience and meticulous documentation. But when it finally arrives, it's worth every moment of the fight. The following morning arrived with a strange mixture of vindication and awkwardness. News of Jake's suspension had spread throughout Tech Fusion with the usual office grapevine efficiency. Colleagues stopped by my desk with congratulations that felt partially genuine and partially damaged control attempts to reposition themselves as having been on my side all along. I accepted their words graciously while focusing on the immediate task, assembling a proper implementation team for my algorithm. With Jake removed from the equation, I could finally approach the project as it should have been run from the start. My first official act as project lead was scheduling a team meeting for that afternoon. I spent the morning reviewing personnel files and performance records, identifying the most qualified developers and engineers for each component of the implementation. The conference room felt different when I stood at the front rather than sitting in the audience. 12 faces looked back at me with varying degrees of curiosity and respect. Some had worked under Jake's direction during the past weeks. Others were new additions I'd specifically requested. Thank you all for joining on short notice, I began. As you may have heard, there have been some leadership changes on this project. I'm Chantel Davis, and I'll be serving as project lead moving forward. I outlined the actual state of the project, not Jake's exaggerated version, but the realistic assessment of where we stood and what needed to be accomplished. The algorithm has tremendous potential, I explained, but we need to be honest about the implementation challenges ahead. The 3-month timeline previously communicated was never realistic. We're looking at 6 months minimum for full implementation. Murmurs rippled through the room. One developer raised her hand, but the board announcement is scheduled for next month. They're expecting preliminary results by then. I'm meeting with William Porter this afternoon to reset expectations, I replied. This project will be based on honest assessments and realistic timelines from now on. The meeting with William proved less difficult than I'd anticipated. After the revelations of Jake's dishonesty, the CEO was primed to accept recalibrated projections. 6 months is longer than we'd hoped, he acknowledged when I presented the revised timeline, but I appreciate the transparent assessment. Better to know the truth now than face disappointments later. We can still demonstrate the proof of concept at the industry conference, I assured him, just with appropriate caveats about full implementation timing. As I left his office, I passed Thomas in the hallway. Our relationship remained strained. His failure to support me when Jake first stole my work wasn't something I could easily forget. "Chantel," he called, hurrying to catch up. "Do you have a moment?" We stepped into an empty meeting room. "I wanted to apologize properly," he began. "I should have listened when you first raised concerns about Jake." "Yes, you should have." He winced at my directness. "You have to understand the position I was in. Jake had powerful allies in the company, and I didn't. I finished for him." "That's exactly the problem, Thomas. You chose political expediency over what was right. You chose to believe him over me despite knowing I'd been working on that project for months." "I made a mistake," he admitted. "A significant one. I'm hoping we can find a way forward professionally." I considered his words carefully. Holding grudges wouldn't serve the project or my career, but neither would pretending the betrayal hadn't happened. "I'll work with you professionally, Thomas. The project needs departmental support, but trust takes time to rebuild." He nodded, accepting the terms of our fragile détente. The days that followed brought a flurry of activity. Diana arranged for the patent application to be corrected, removing Jake's name and listing me as the sole inventor. The legal team began reviewing all documentation to ensure the company was protected from potential repercussions of Jake's fraudulent claims. One afternoon, Paula from HR requested a meeting. The same woman who had handed me a performance improvement plan weeks earlier now sat across from me with a very different demeanor. "We've completed our investigation into Mr. Sullivan's conduct," she explained. "His employment has been terminated, effective immediately." "I see," I replied, keeping my expression neutral despite the surge of satisfaction I felt. "Additionally, we've discovered a pattern of similar behavior with other employees, past and present. The company is implementing new policies to prevent such situations in the future." "That's good to hear." She slid a document across the desk, a formal letter of apology from Tech Fusion, acknowledging the mishandling of my initial reports and confirming the removal of all negative documentation from my file. "There's one more thing," Paula added. "William has approved an exceptional performance bonus in recognition of your innovation and perseverance. The details are included in the letter." The figure listed was substantial equivalent to half my annual salary. Financial compensation couldn't erase the emotional toll of the past weeks, but it represented tangible recognition of the wrong that had been done. That evening, Alicia and I celebrated properly at an upscale restaurant downtown. "To justice," she toasted, raising her wine glass, "and to brilliant women who refuse to be silenced." I clinked my glass against hers. "And to friends who stand by you when it matters most." "I almost forgot," she said, reaching into her bag. "A little victory present." She handed me a small box containing an elegant pen engraved with the words, "Ideas worth fighting for." "It's perfect," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. As dinner progressed, Alicia brought up something unexpected. "Have you thought about what this means for your future at Tech Fusion?" "What do you mean?" "You've exposed a significant failure in the company's culture and leadership. You won this battle, but I wonder about the war." Her question made me pause. The vindication of recent days had occupied all my attention, but she raised a valid point. Would Tech Fusion truly change? Or would this be treated as an isolated incident while the underlying problems persisted? "I've been offered another option," I admitted. "Horizon Technologies reached out yesterday. They're interested in both me and my algorithm." Alicia's eyebrows rose. "Seriously? Would you consider leaving?" "I don't know. Tech Fusion is making amends, and the project is finally moving forward correctly. But trust, once broken, is hard to repair," she finished for me. The question lingered in my mind as I returned to work the next day. The algorithm implementation was progressing well with the properly skilled team now in place. Colleagues treated me with new respect, and senior leadership had become notably more attentive to my input. Yet, underneath the professional victories, something still felt unresolved. The system that had protected Jake for so long hadn't fundamentally changed. New policies on paper didn't necessarily translate to cultural transformation. These thoughts were interrupted by an email from Diana requesting my presence at a meeting that afternoon. When I arrived, I was surprised to find several board members present alongside William and the executive team. "Chantel," Diana began, "we've been discussing the broader implications of recent events. The board feels this situation revealed significant structural problems in how Tech Fusion handles innovation attribution and employee concerns." William took over. "We're establishing a new Innovation Protection Committee with oversight on all intellectual property development and attribution. We'd like you to serve as the inaugural chairperson." The proposal was unexpected. This wasn't just acknowledgement of my specific situation, but an opportunity to create systemic change. The role would include developing new protocols for documenting project contributions, Diana explained, and establishing clear channels for employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation. "Would this committee have actual authority?" I asked, "or would it be advisory only?" "Full authority," William confirmed, reporting directly to the board. "Recent events made it clear we need meaningful checks and balances." As the meeting concluded, Diana walked with me back to my office. "This is a real opportunity, Chantel, a chance to ensure what happened to you doesn't happen to others." "I appreciate that. I just need time to consider all aspects of the situation." She nodded understanding. "Of course. But for what it's worth, leaders who recognize and learn from failures are rare in this industry. William is genuinely committed to change." That evening, I called Sarah Jenkins, the former colleague who had experienced similar treatment from Jake. "I heard what happened," she said. "Couldn't have happened to a more deserving person. Jake built his entire career stealing other people's work." I told her about the Innovation Protection Committee and asked for her perspective as someone who had left the company under similar circumstances. "It's a start," she acknowledged. "More than I expected from Tech Fusion, honestly. The question is whether the change goes beyond this one committee." Her words echoed my own uncertainty. Meaningful change required more than new policies or committees. It needed a fundamental shift in values and behavior throughout the organization. As I weighed my options over the following days, I realized this crossroads represented something larger than a career decision. It was a choice between leaving for a fresh start or staying to help build the change I wanted to see. The answer became clear during the final implementation planning session for my algorithm. Looking around the table at my team, people now engaged in building something genuine, their contributions properly recognized, I understood my path forward. The system had failed me, yes, but systems can change when enough determined people demand it. Perhaps my experience could serve as a catalyst for that change. I emailed Diana that evening, accepting the committee chairperson role, with one condition. The committee would include representatives from all levels of the organization, not just management. Real protection required diverse perspectives, especially from those most vulnerable to the abuses we aim to prevent. Her response arrived within minutes. "Condition accepted. This is how real change begins." As I closed my laptop, a sense of purpose replaced the lingering uncertainty. The fight for recognition had been painful, but it had revealed a path towards something potentially transformative, not just for me, but for everyone at Tech Fusion who deserved to have their contributions valued and protected. Sometimes the greatest innovations aren't the algorithms or technologies we create, but the systems we build to ensure everyone's voice is heard. 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where Jake had once presented my work as his own. The audience was similar board members, executives, key investors, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. This wasn't a presentation built on deception, but a genuine demonstration of success. The cloud optimization algorithm has exceeded even our revised projections, I explained, displaying the performance metrics on screen. Processing efficiency has improved by 52%, with corresponding cost reduction of 47% across implemented systems. William nodded approvingly from his seat at the head of the table. The financial impact is already significant. Q3 results showed an operating cost reduction of $12 million in cloud infrastructure. The journey to this moment had been long but deeply satisfying. After accepting the role as Innovation Protection Committee chairperson, I divided my time between implementing my algorithm and developing new protocols for intellectual property protection at Tech Fusion. The dual responsibilities had been challenging but complementary. Each technical victory with the algorithm reinforced the importance of proper attribution. Each policy improvement through the committee created safer conditions for future innovations. As we look toward full deployment across all Tech Fusion products, I continued. We project annual savings exceeding $40 million. More importantly, the reduced processing time translates to improved customer experience across all platforms. The questions that followed were substantive and technical, exactly the kind I'd prepared for. No vague references to proprietary technology or deflections to hide limited understanding. I answered each query with confidence born of genuine expertise. After the presentation, Diana approached with a satisfied smile. You've transformed more than an algorithm, Chantel. You've changed how innovation happens at Tech Fusion. She wasn't exaggerating. The Innovation Protection Committee had implemented significant changes over the past months. A mandatory documentation system for all projects, creating clear records of individual contributions, anonymous reporting channels for intellectual property concerns, regular audits of patent applications and project attributions, mentorship programs pairing senior inventors with emerging talent. The impact extended beyond policy. A cultural shift was gradually taking hold, one that valued substantive contribution over political maneuvering. Thomas had become a surprising ally in this transformation, perhaps motivated by a desire to atone for his earlier failures. The engineering department has fully adopted the new collaboration framework, he'd reported at our last committee meeting. Initial resistance has given way to appreciation for the clarity it provides. Not every change had been smooth. Several managers who had thrived in the old system resisted the increased transparency. Two had chosen to leave rather than adapt. Their departures created space for promotions based on merit rather than connections. As the board meeting concluded, William asked me to stay behind. When the room cleared, he sat across from me with a thoughtful expression. The board has been discussing our executive leadership structure, he began. Diana is transitioning to our European division at her request, which leaves a vacancy for Chief Technology Officer. My heart quickened. The CTO position was several levels above my current role, a jump that would typically take years of ladder climbing. We'd like you to consider the position, he continued. Your technical credentials are impeccable, but more importantly, you've demonstrated the leadership and integrity this company needs moving forward. The offer was momentous. A validation beyond anything I could have imagined 6 months earlier. Yet it wasn't the title or prestige that moved me most, but the recognition of values I'd fought to uphold. I'm honored, I replied sincerely. I'd like to take some time to consider. Of course. The formal offer will be prepared by week's end. As I walked back to my office, I passed the cubicle that had once been Jake's. A new developer now occupied the space, a promising engineer I'd personally recruited from a university program. She waved as I passed, and I stopped to ask about her current project. The conversation reminded me how far things had come. 6 months ago, I'd stood in this office feeling invisible and powerless. Now I moved through the same space as someone whose contributions were not only recognized but celebrated. Later that afternoon, I met Alicia for coffee in the atrium. Our friendship had deepened through the challenges of the past months, strengthened by our shared commitment to creating a more equitable workplace. Chief Technology Officer, she mused when I shared the news. That's quite a title upgrade from disgruntled employee on a performance improvement plan. We laughed, able now to find humor in what had once been so painful. Have you thought about what happened to Jake? She asked. I heard he struggled to find another position. I hadn't spent much time thinking about Jake's fate, deliberately focusing my energy on rebuilding rather than resentment. But industry connections had occasionally brought news. Last I heard, he'd taken a much lower-level position at a startup, I replied. Apparently, word spread about what happened here. Karma, Alicia nodded, though I'm sure he's telling everyone it was all a misunderstanding. Probably. But without the system protecting him, he'll have to actually do the work this time. That evening, I stayed late at the office, using the quiet hours to reflect on the CTO offer. The position represented an extraordinary opportunity to shape technological direction at a company level. Yet it would also mean less hands-on development work, the creative problem-solving that had drawn me to programming in the first place. As I considered my options, Sarah Jenkins called. She'd recently returned to Tech Fusion as a department director, part of the wave of positive changes reshaping the company culture. "I heard about the CTO offer," she said. "News travels fast." "I'm still processing it," I admitted. "It's a significant shift from my current role." "That's exactly why you should take it," Sarah replied. "Tech Fusion needs leadership that understands both the technical and human sides of innovation. You've proven you can navigate both." Her words resonated with something I'd been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. My journey hadn't just been about reclaiming my algorithm, it had revealed capabilities I hadn't recognized in myself. The ability to stand firm against injustice, to build systems that protect others, to lead from principles rather than expedience. The following week, I accepted the CTO position. The announcement generated excitement throughout the company, particularly among the technical teams who saw my promotion as validation of substance over style. My first official act as CTO was establishing the Tech Fusion Innovation Mentorship Program, an initiative pairing experienced developers with promising talent from underrepresented groups in tech. The program included explicit protections for intellectual property and clear attribution protocols. 3 months into my new role, we held the inaugural Innovation Showcase, where teams presented their projects to the entire company with proper credit for all contributors. The event highlighted not just what we were building, but how we were building it collaboratively, transparently, and ethically. After the showcase, I found Diana's Innovation Protection Committee gift on my desk, that elegant pen engraved with ideas worth fighting for. It had become something of a talisman through the challenges of the past year. Looking at it now, I realized the phrase had taken on new meaning. The fight wasn't just about defending my own ideas, but creating space where everyone's contributions could be recognized and valued, where innovation thrived because people felt safe to create. The journey from that devastating moment of theft to this position of influence had been unpredictable and often painful. Yet, standing on the other side, I could see how each difficult step had been necessary, not just for my personal vindication, but for the larger change it sparked. The system that had once protected people like Jake was being dismantled, replaced by something more equitable and ultimately more innovative. Real progress isn't built on stolen ideas and false credit, but on genuine collaboration where everyone's contributions matter. My algorithm continued to generate significant value for Tech Fusion, but its greatest impact wasn't measured in processing efficiency or cost savings. Its true legacy was in the transformation. It triggered a company culture where innovation was protected and credit rightfully given. Sometimes the most powerful algorithm isn't the one that processes data faster, but the one that changes how people work together, the one that transforms the very system itself. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when someone else tried to take credit for your work? What strategies did you use to document your contributions and ensure proper recognition? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you found this story insightful, please like and subscribe to support more content about workplace justice and professional growth. And don't forget to share with friends who might be facing similar challenges. Sometimes knowing you're not alone in these battles can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to protect what's rightfully yours, no matter how intimidating the opposition might seem.